Hey everyone, and welcome back. So today we're diving into Atomic Habits.
Excited to be here.
We've got a fascinating request from a listener this time. They're dying to finally write that novel. The one that's been
Oh,
kicking around in their head.
I know that feeling.
Right. It's such a common dream, but then actually sitting down and making it
The
happen.
consistency is where it gets tricky.
Exactly. And that's where I think Atomic Habits comes in. Plus, it fits perfectly with the excerpts you pulled out.
Yeah, let's break it down.
So James Clear, the author, he's all about this idea that it's not really about individual habits, right? It's more like becoming the kind of person who achieves what they want.
Totally. And it's not just about wanting it, it's about becoming that person.
Which sounds kind of deep, but I think this deep dive is going to make it practical. Okay, so one of the things that jumped out from what you shared was this plateau of latent potential,
Oh, that's a good one.
right? So you're putting in the work, but you don't see results right away. Kind
Yeah.
of discouraging.
It is. It's like, imagine you're trying to boil water, so you turn on the stove, the heat's going, but for the longest time, it's just not
And
boiling.
you're like, is this thing even working? Should I turn the heat up more? Am I just bad at boiling water?
Exactly. But here's the thing, that heat, it's not wasted. Just like with the water, there's this point where, bam, it hits that magic temperature, and suddenly you've got a rolling boil.
And it feels like it happened instantly,
Mm-hmm.
but it was really all that gradual heating up beforehand.
Mm.
I can see how that applies to building habits, but I guess the question then is, what's happening in our brains during that not boiling phase?
Well, the cool thing is there's actually a scientific explanation for this. Our brains are constantly rewiring themselves, right? That's neuroplasticity. And each time we do something, even if it's small, we're strengthening those neural pathways.
So even if we don't see the results right away, that effort, is doing something.
Exactly. Think of it like building a muscle. You don't walk into the gym and suddenly have a six-pack.
Oh, I wish it worked that way.
Right. It takes consistent effort over time. But the more you work that muscle, the stronger it gets. Same with habits.
So for our aspiring novelist out there, if they could just get themselves to write even a little bit each day.
They're building that writing muscle, and that's huge.
I love that. Okay, so we're not just building muscles, though. We talked about how Atomic Habits emphasizes this idea of identity.
Yes. It's not just about writing a novel, it's about becoming a writer.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? How do we shift from, I want to write a novel, to, I am a writer?
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question, and luckily, Atomic Habits gives us some pretty awesome tools to answer it.
So give us the rundown. How do we bridge that gap? What's the secret sauce?
Well, Clear talks about this idea of casting votes. Each
Yeah.
little action we take is like a vote for the kind of person we want to become.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that work with, the whole writing thing?
So instead of saying, I want to be a writer, you ask yourself, what would a writer do right now?
That's a good question. I guess a writer would probably, ignore their phone and
And open up their laptop, maybe, start writing, even if it's just a
and
sentence,
if it's terrible.
especially if it's terrible. The point is, you're acting in alignment with that identity you're trying to build.
So each little writing session, no matter how short, is like casting a vote for Writer Me.
You got it. And those votes, they add up over time, just like those little degrees of heat getting that water to boil.
I'm starting to see how this all comes together, but okay, let's say our aspiring novelist is ready to start casting some votes. They sit down to write, and then their brain goes, ooh, shiny object.
Happens to the best of us.
Right. So how do we actually make those good habits stick, especially when distractions are, everywhere these days?
Well, this is where Atomic Habits really shines because it gives us this really practical framework. Clear lays out these 4 laws of behavior change, and they're like golden rules for building good habits and breaking bad ones.
Okay, hit me with these laws. What's the first one?
The first law is all about making the cue obvious.
The cue.
Right. Remember we talked about the habit loop? The cue is the trigger that kicks off that whole cycle.
Okay, so if I want to make writing a habit, the cue would be what?
It could be anything. But the key is to make it super obvious, something you can't miss. Like, let's say you want to write in the morning. Maybe you set up your workspace the night before, laptop open, favorite pen, ready to go.
So when you wake up, it's like, boom, time to write.
Exactly. You're making it easy to start the habit.
Okay, I love that. What's the second law?
Law number 2, make it attractive.
Okay, that one seems tough. How do we make something like writing, which can be, let's be honest, kind of intimidating sometimes? How do we make that attractive?
Well, one way is by using this technique called temptation bundling. It's basically like linking something you need to do with something you want to do.
Oh, I do that. Sometimes when I really need to focus, I light my favorite candle, this amazing lavender one. Something about that smell just puts me in the zone.
See, you're already a master habit hacker.
I never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
All right, 2 laws down, 2 to go. What's next?
All right, the third law is all about making it easy.
Easy like Sunday morning.
Exactly. We want to reduce the friction associated with our good habits, and by the same token, we want to increase the friction for the bad ones.
So less scrolling, more writing.
You got it. It's way too easy to fall into the trap of scrolling on our phones, right? So if we want to write more, maybe we put our phone in another room while we're working.
Or use one of those apps that block social media for a certain amount of time.
Exactly. Out of sight, out of mind.
Love it. Okay, so we've made the cue obvious, made it attractive, made it easy. What's the final piece of the puzzle?
The fourth law is all about making it satisfying.
Okay, so we're talking rewards here.
Exactly. Our brains are wired to crave those little hits of dopamine, those feelings of pleasure and reward.
Which makes sense why we keep going back to the cookie jar.
Right. So if we want to make a habit stick, we need to find a way to make it feel good.
Even if it's something like writing, which, let's be real, the reward often comes much later.
That's the challenge, right? But there are ways to make even those delayed gratification activities more satisfying in the moment.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, think about how you can build in little celebrations along the way. Maybe it's treating yourself to your favorite coffee after a solid writing session.
Ooh, yes. I'm all about rewarding myself with a latte.
Or maybe it's something as simple as taking a few minutes to savor that feeling of accomplishment after you finish a chapter.
I like that. Acknowledging those little wins.
Exactly. It's about finding those little ways to make the process itself feel rewarding.
This has been so helpful.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, even with the best systems in place, there are still days when I just don't feel like it, like at all.
Oh, absolutely. Motivation is not this magical thing that just appears when you need it. It's fickle, comes and goes like the weather.
So what do we do on those days when even our favorite candle and a latte can't get us going?
That is the question, isn't it? And this is where I think Atomic Habits offers a really powerful perspective shift. It's not about never feeling unmotivated. It's about showing up anyway.
Easier said than done, though, am I right?
Oh, 100%. But think about it. Anyone can show up on the good days, right? It's those tough days, the days when you'd rather do anything but the thing you're supposed to do. That's what separates the amateurs from the pros.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's like, remember that sculptor analogy we talked about? Some days you're chiseling away with huge, powerful swings. Other days, it might just be a few gentle taps. But the key is to keep showing up, keep chipping away, even if the progress seems invisible.
It's about trusting the process.
Exactly. Trusting that all those little actions, all those votes for the person you want to become will add up to something incredible over time.
I love that. And you know what? It all comes back to that idea of identity, doesn't it? If we truly see ourselves as writers, then those tough days, they don't seem so insurmountable.
Exactly. You're not doing it to become a writer. You're doing it because you are a writer.
It's so powerful. And on that note, any final thoughts from Atomic Habits that you think would be helpful for our listeners as they embark on this journey of building better habits, whether it's writing or anything else?
You know, there's this quote from the book that really stuck with me. It says, happiness is not a destination. It's the difference between our current state and our desired state.
Wow, that's good.
Right. So it's not about achieving some perfect state of being. It's about recognizing those small wins along the way. It's about enjoying the journey, even when it's messy and imperfect.
I love that. And you know what? I think that's the perfect note to end on. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up, embracing the process, and trusting that those small changes, those atomic habits, will lead to extraordinary results. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Atomic Habits. We'll catch you next time.